What if I told you that Princess Diana, known as the People's Princess, wasn't actually just a young woman who was lucky enough to marry a prince? What if behind her shy face and tragic fate there was a forgotten legacy marked by blood, prisons and severed heads? This is the story that few dare to reveal, that of a cursed lineage that spanned centuries and came back to life in Diana, behind the glare of the spotlight. What ran through her veins was not just Spencer blood. Diana carried within her the echo of a dynasty that England tried to erase from the history books, the Tudors, the same clan that forged kings and queens, that raised crowns amid intrigue and cut down lives with the blade of an executioner. Lineage that survived in the shadows, hidden but never disappeared. For a long time, it was believed that the death of Elizabeth I had extinguished the Tudors forever. But history holds ironies. The lineage, though persecuted, flourished in silence mixed with lesser families until it returned with force to the heart of the British monarchy 5 centuries later through Diana. This is not just a story about a tragic princess. It is about a blood debt that seemed settled but spanned generations, returning in the form of revenge. A silent revenge, carried in the eyes of a young woman who would become a global symbol. What you will see next is a journey through kings, betrayals, prisons and curses that culminate in the birth of the most beloved and at the same time most wounded woman in modern royalty. A story that proves that the past is never buried. Our narrative begins long before Diana. It goes back to the 16th century, to the reign of Henry VIII, a monarch known for his fury, his beheaded wives, and his thirst for power. Among the pieces in this political game was his younger sister, Mary Tudor, a young woman of unusual beauty, described as a rare pearl, but who, like all pearls, could be used as a bargaining chip. Henry gave her in marriage to the King of France, Louis XIV, an old and sick man. For Mary, at 18, this was not love, but a sacrifice for her brother's power. Widowed within a few months, she kept secret a promise she had made before leaving. If she survived her husband, she would marry the true owner of her heart, Charles Brandon, Duke of Suffolk, the king's own best friend. Against all rules, Mary kept her oath. In a small chapel on the outskirts of Paris, with discreet witnesses and a nervous priest, she secretly married Charles. And it was in this act of forbidden love that the seed of a curse was born. When Henry found out, his anger almost destroyed his relationship with his sister and his friend. He did not kill them, but he imposed a humiliating punishment. He confiscated their wealth, forced them to remarry with his consent, and decreed that their descendants would live under surveillance without power or rights. Mary Tudor's lineage had been condemned. It was from this marriage that a lineage marked by misfortune sprang forth, a bloodline that was watched, persecuted, and destined to pay dearly for this rebellious love. And it is precisely this lineage that centuries later would return to pulsate in Diana. Write in the comments, blood never forgets, if you also believe that destiny can span centuries and return to the right people. From the forbidden marriage of Mary Tudor and Charles Brandon, Frances Brandon was born. And from her would come a daughter who would carry the weight of the curse on her back, Lady Jane Grey, a brilliant young woman, a lover of books, erudite in philosophy and theology, but who never wanted to rule. At 16, she was forced to accept a crown that burned like hot iron. After the early death of Edward VI, son of Henry VIII, England plunged into disputes between Catholics and Protestants. Jane, a Protestant with Tudor blood, was the choice of advisors who feared the return of Catholicism at the hands of Mary, the late king's older sister. Thus, against her will, Jane was proclaimed Queen. Her days of glory were brief. In just 9 days, the people turned against her, clamoring for Mary Tudor as the rightful heir. The young woman, who dreamed only of the silence of libraries, was locked up in the Tower of London, where she awaited a cruel fate. First, her husband was executed before her eyes. Then it was her turn. On the cold morning of February 1554, Jane calmly climbed the scaffold, but when she extended her hands, she did not find the execution block. Terrified, she cried out, "What should I do? Where is it?" A guard guided her, and moments later the blade fell. At only 16 years old, Lady Jane Grey, the 9-day queen, paid with her own blood for the audacity of her ancestors, and the echo of her death became another link in the chain of tragedies that would span generations. But the curse did not stop with Jane. Her sisters Catherine and Mary Grey would also be persecuted by the crown. Catherine, gifted with grace and beauty, secretly married Edward Seymour, a powerful nobleman. When her pregnancy came to light, Queen Elizabeth I reacted with fury. She declared the marriage invalid, called her children bastards, and locked her away in gloomy castles until her death at the age of 27. Mary Grey, the youngest, was born with physical deformities and was treated as harmless at court. But she also dared to choose love. She married a simple guard, defying royalty. When discovered, she suffered the same punishment: isolation, humiliation, and oblivion. She died in the shadows, without glory, erased from official memory. The three Grey sisters, Jane, Catherine, and Mary, represented three forms of martyrdom: execution, imprisonment, and ridicule. None of them had peace, and their deaths seemed to confirm that the lineage of Mary Tudor was doomed to disappear. But blood has memory. Although the crowns tried to erase their names from the records, the heritage continued to pulse, hidden in smaller families, mixed in almost invisible genealogies. A cursed but resilient bloodline. And this is where the big question arises. How could this thread of tragedies, seemingly cut off in the 16th century, shine again in the heart of the British monarchy almost 500 years later? The answer lies with the young Diana. After the Grey sisters, it was believed that Mary Tudor's lineage had been extinguished. Elizabeth seemed to have won. One by one, the heirs were crushed, and their children considered illegitimate. Officially, that blood no longer had a right to the crown. But what the official books tried to erase, life insisted on preserving. Even though they were considered bastards, some descendants survived. They mixed with lesser families, moved away from the palaces, and lived far from the gaze of royalty. They were discreet nobles, landowners, wives of clergymen, respectable but invisible people. Thus, Tudor blood continued to flow silently, hidden in second-rate marriages. The curse was not over. It was just waiting for the right time to return. Among these forgotten branches, a seemingly harmless surname emerged: Spencer, a family of wool merchants who became wealthy and later owners of large estates. Respected, yes, but without the glamour of the royal houses. What no one knew was that behind this name lay the distant echo of the Grey sisters and Mary Tudor. Blood that seemed dormant, but waited patiently for the moment to reappear. Centuries passed. Kings came and went: Stuart, Hanover, Windsor. The Tudor surname became just a memory in history books. But in fact, their blood continued to burn, hidden, ready to return to the surface. In 1961, a girl with blue eyes and a shy smile was born: Diana Frances Spencer. The world believed she was just an ordinary young woman, destined for a fairy tale. But in her veins ran the heritage of the Tudors. When Diana married Charles, the heir to the British crown, the whole world celebrated. It was as if a commoner had been chosen to be a princess. But the truth was much darker. It wasn't Diana who joined the royal family. It was the royal family that returned to her. And in this marriage, something even more impressive happened: the union of two branches of the same dynasty. Diana carried the blood of Mary Tudor, while Charles was descended from Margaret Tudor, Henry VIII's older sister. Thus, centuries later, the two Tudor lineages reunited. But what did this reunion mean? Was it just a genealogical coincidence, or proof that curses and destinies can span generations until they manifest at the exact moment? Diana grew up shy, insecure, but also gifted with a rare sensitivity. From an early age, she seemed to carry a quiet melancholy, as if she already sensed that her life would not be ordinary. Upon entering the royal family, she became a global symbol, but also a prisoner of a cruel fate. The fairy tale quickly showed its cracks. Her marriage to Charles was marked by distance, lack of love, and public betrayals. The young woman, whom the world revered as the people's princess, was, behind the scenes, a lonely woman, suffocated by England's most rigid institution. Like Mary Tudor, Jane Grey, and Catherine Grey, Diana was also used as a political pawn. Her youth, charisma, and image were exploited, but her freedom was constantly denied. She smiled in public, but privately she lived under the same invisible chains that imprisoned her ancestors. The pressure was so great that her suffering became evident. Bulimia, emotional crises, and her ever-melancholic gaze revealed that the curse had not disappeared. Tudor blood seemed to take its toll, turning her life into a succession of pain and disappointment. And the most ironic thing, the more she suffered, the more she was loved by the people, as if her tragedy were necessary for her myth to flourish. Even in the face of pain, Diana never stopped fighting. She transformed her suffering into compassion for others, dedicating herself to humanitarian causes, helping the sick, orphans, and marginalized people. This strength led her to be called the People's Princess. But by challenging the strict rules of the crown, Diana relived the fate of her ancestors. She became a thorn in the side of the monarchy. Her popularity grew with every gesture, while her relationship with the institution deteriorated. The weight of the Tudor curse was once again present. Women who dared to break the chains always paid dearly. When she finally separated from Charles, many believed she would finally find freedom. However, tragedy still haunted her. Her death in a car accident in Paris shook the entire world, ending her story as abruptly as the sword stroke that took Jane Grey's life. Fate seemed to repeat the same pattern. Women of this lineage never had happy endings. Diana became the latest victim of a legacy that spanned 5 centuries. And the question that still intrigues us today remains: was her death just a coincidence, or the last chapter in a curse that was never broken? Diana's death did not end the story. On the contrary, it paved the way for something even more symbolic: her sons, William and Harry. With them, the Tudor lineage returned to the throne in an unquestionable way. William, in particular, carries not only Windsor blood, but also the blood of the Grey sisters, Mary Tudor, and all the heritage that history tried to erase. This means that when William takes the crown, it will not only be the victory of a modern dynasty, it will be the return of blood that for centuries was condemned, humiliated, and persecuted. Blood that survived Jane's execution, Catherine's imprisonment, Mary Grey's ridicule, and Diana's tragedy. With each generation, this lineage seemed destined for suffering. But in William, the curse may finally turn into redemption. The heir to the throne will be both the direct descendant of those who were silenced and the symbol of revenge for a lineage that refused to die. And here is the most powerful irony. Henry VIII, who tried so hard to control the fate of his family, would never have imagined that centuries later it would be the forbidden blood of his sister that would end up reigning over his land. The crown that beheaded Jane Grey, imprisoned Catherine, ridiculed Mary, and suffocated Diana now bows before their descendants. Diana was never just a sad princess in a modern fairy tale. She was the heir to a lineage marked by tragedy, but also by unbreakable resilience. Each of her tears was a reflection of centuries of accumulated pain. Each smile hid the echo of voices silenced in the past. When the world called her the people's princess, the truth was even greater. She was the Tudors' ultimate revenge, a silent revenge that waited 5 centuries to manifest itself and now lives on through the blood of her children. Fate, which seemed to only repeat misfortunes, today reveals itself as a cycle that returns transformed. That blood that was persecuted, humiliated, and considered illegitimate now sits once again on the throne of England. Thus, Diana's life cannot be seen only as tragedy, but as part of a much broader story, a story of lineage, silence, and resurrection. A story that proves that the past never dies. And now, if this narrative made sense to you, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss the next videos. Because here we tell what history tried to hide.